What happens when a soldier who is sworn to defend liberty faces a choice? Obey orders that violate his conscience, or risk everything to stand for truth. Welcome to the Britt Mayer Show, where we dive into stories like this that defines courage in the face of tyranny. Today, we're joined by Mark Bashaw, a former U.S. Army First Lieutenant who dared to say no to the COVID-19 mandates. Not only did he say no, but he called them lies and a pharmaceutical regime. He was court-martialed, discharged, and then later pardoned by President Donald J. Trump. Bashaw's journey is a blazing warning to every American about the cost of unchecked power and the power of standing firm. From his faith-driven defiance to his call to rebel against tyranny, we're going to unpack his entire story, why it echoes America's founding fight for freedom, and what it means for you today. Wherever you're listening to this conversation, please subscribe and make sure to share, and let's get started. I've been married to my teenage sweetheart for a really long time. And as we age, it's important that I continue to help support him so that he can thrive and be the best man for our kids, for me, and for all the things in life. That's why I absolutely love We Heart Nutrition's men's bundle. This little trio includes the men's multivitamin, magnesium glycinate, and the omega-3. They're all superstars. Since starting this trio a while ago, my man tells me that he has more energy, he feels sharper, and he sleeps better, which is so important. This bundle delivers, and it's under $80. You can use my code ROOTEDWINGS at weheartnutrition.com to grab this and help support your man, because you and your family need your man at his best. weheartnutrition.com, code ROOTEDWINGS. Mark Bashaw, you're an American hero. I am really excited to have you sit down with me and talk through your journey that I was just saying you probably never saw this coming when you enlisted. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. I followed your story and I was so excited. I told my producer when we saw that you got pardoned, I'm like, we've got to find him. We have to find a way to get you on, because I just think you're such an example of the true American spirit. And sometimes that gets lost and muddied in kind of this new world that we're living in. But you're taking us back to the roots of what it is to be a true American. So that's what I want to focus on with this. So let's first give our audience just a little bit of background on who you are, that you, your journey as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army to now being a figure known for resisting what you've called American tyranny. Give us a little background into that.
Yeah, so 17 years military, like you said, a medical officer. I most recently departed from Army Public Health Center. That's where they unlawfully discharged me. I was a medical officer, preventive medicine officer, specialized in medical entomology and risk communication strategies for vector-borne disease that may or may not affect our service members. And so the whole COVID-19 pandemic kicked off, and it was an absolute nightmare at Army Public Health Center when the entire center went home to telework, and I was confused as to why we weren't trying to figure this out and get to the root cause. What we were dealing with was a pack of lies. And that goes from the diagnostics to the testing, to the masking, to the jabs. And so, I stood up and I ended up getting court-martialed, banned from my place of duty for 413 days, threatened with Leavenworth imprisonment. I ended up, getting dubbed an insider threat after I submitted data to a federal court showing these immense safety signals with these experimental products, specifically the injections. And so they sent me to a court-martial, convicted me, and then continued to come after me even after the court-martial for a whole year. And then, like I said, they unlawfully discharged me in June of 2023. And then most recently, which was an amazing surprise, President Trump gave me a full unconditional pardon for my conviction in that court-martial, which was incredible. And so I'm still processing all of it.
Yeah. Total roller coaster ride for you. Before the COVID-19 mandates, crept in. What was it that really shaped your vision on duty, freedom, authority while you were serving at the Army Public Health Center?
So it was that largely came from my military service. I mean, growing up in the military, I came from right out of high school, enlisted in the military, the training, the mentorship, everything I received along the way prepared me for this point in time. And so when I say the military literally trained me to do what I did, that's exactly right. They trained me to, if there came a point in time where I had to defy unlawful orders, that's exactly what I had to do. That's my duty, and that's what the military trained me to do. And so when this all happened, at first I was completely isolated. I didn't really have anybody that was seeing things the way I was seeing them at Army Public Health Center. But when I got banned from my place of duty, I started meeting all the other service members that saw this for what it was. And frankly, the people, school teachers, individuals like yourself that were doing podcasts or trying to get that information out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started working together and sharing notes and information. And so we largely were working together to try to redress our grievances in a legal, lawful, and per military regulation type of way with our chain of commands, only for that to completely fail. And it wasn't even close. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes there's gray areas. We find ourselves in gray areas, but this was so incredibly belligerent because not only was it violating the Constitution, it was violating federal statutes. It was also violating military regulations. So you kind of check the box throughout, just completely wrong. And then from a service member point of view, when I saw the men and women and children of our country being forced and coerced and manipulated to have to do things that, like close down their business, for example, or muzzle their kids going into school. For me, from my perspective, I was like, that is not why I wear the uniform. That's the reason why I wear the uniform is to prevent that sort of tyranny, if it comes down to it. And it seemed like, that's where it was. It was just completely belligerent and foreign to what we know to be true as Americans.
Yeah. Was there any point during the rising tide of COVID that you believed in the narrative, or from the beginning, were there red flags?
No, for me, it was from the very beginning. In 2000, and I like to tell this story because it goes back to my faith in Jesus Christ. In 2018, I submitted my life to Jesus Christ, God Almighty, and continuously been asking, like, show me what I need to see, show me what I need to hear. And from that point on, God really was showing me what I need to see and what I need to hear. And I was asking for it the entire time. In fact, I wasn't even in the Army at that point in time. I was still enlisted in the Air Force. And one of my goals was to become an officer. And I really wanted to be an officer. And I worked for literally 14 years straight in the military to get my education after hours. So after duty hours, I would do my education. And so I worked myself up to a point where I was able to get a direct commission. And so I was directly commissioned into the Army in September of 2019 into the Medical Service Corps. And I think God's got quite the sense of humor. He's like, I'm going to give you everything you asked for. But your job is to shine light in the darkness. And I went to Army Public Health Center January 2020. I had no clue. I kept on asking God. I was like, why am I here? This doesn't make any sense. They're not talking about the real problems that are affecting our service members. And then COVID-19 kicked off, and I was like, oh no, this is bad. Like, this is now I see why you sent me, Lord. And I was like, all right, I asked for it. And so wow. I'm going to carry out my duties.
In 2023 on X, you said, I got court-martialed because I refused to participate with lies. So I want to know from you what specific lies in the COVID-19 protocols, like the vaccine mandates or testing requirements, prompted you to be defiant? And like, what was it that was the tipping point for you?
For me, it was the psychological manipulation, the safe and effective. For me, it was looking at the risk communication strategy that the Army Public Health Center had, and just seeing it, that it was full of propaganda, that it was seeing completely lacking the risks that were known at this point in time, which was the VAERS data, the Department of Defense's own database to report dangers to these injections is VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And so when I saw that, and then on top of that, my children, my own children, and then the American people shutting down their business, but it was basically my children being forced to mask. That's like my tipping point. Like, you're messing with the children at this point in time. Like, and continuously messing with them, and there's no safety and efficacy involved in this. It's strictly a psychological manipulation tool for compliance. And that was my tipping point, messing with the children.
The kids, that was it for me too, was as soon as I was similar to you. I'm a Christian, and I felt it from the beginning, which is how I grew. Actually, my position was I just started speaking out against it. Amen. Right off the bat. It was when Italy closed. That was a big one for me, where I'm like, the data is not even lining up, and we're closing down. Like, what is going on? This is bizarre. But then when they started focusing on the kids, and the kids were like so low risk, it was at 0.00001%, and that's if you're not even like, if you're throwing in all the comorbidities as COVID. I just was like, right. This is insane.
And on top of the manipulated testing as well. I always go back to one of the main quote unquote weapons of this whole situation. The main weapon is weaponized diagnostics. Because if they can get you and your body labeled a certain way, then they can manipulate you and control you. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were running the cycle thresholds for these testing. And I worked with a laboratory sergeant down at Fort Meade. He was running these tests. I was like, hey, what are you running the cycle thresholds at? Oh, they got us mandated to run them at 45 cycle thresholds.
Tell people what, because I know what that means with the number that you run it, but explain that for the audience, what that means.
Yes. So the cycle threshold rate is basically the magnification level of the sample you're looking at. And so the higher the cycle threshold, the higher magnification you're looking at, and the more likelihood you're going to find anything it is you're plugging in to look for. And again, we go back to the fact that these were never meant to diagnose the human body of disease. It goes back to even the founder. I mean, now they switched and they called it the gold standard of diagnostics, but it's not. It was never supposed to be used. And what was happening was it was being weaponized. And that was another one of my tipping points was, in the military, if you were quote unquote unvaccinated at a certain point in time, they started weaponizing the masking and the testing against you.
Yeah.
And it basically outed your whole private medical status, because before that point in time, you could walk around and everybody's wearing a mask. So you don't know who's what. But after a certain point in time, they were like, no, only the unvaccinated are going to mask and test. And in order to access your place of duty, you've got to participate with this. And I was like, no, like, absolutely not. Like, this is not happening right now. And so I actually thought I was going to get arrested when I showed up to my place of duty, because that's how they were postured. But they just, at that point in time, they just banned me from the entire installation, basically, and refused me access to my place of duty. So at that point in time, I was just,
do you know what they did out here in Los Angeles, which I'll never forget, because I was working with the firefighters during COVID, because they went crazy on the LA firefighters out here. They had unvaccinated fire trucks and vaccinated fire trucks. Is that the most insane thing?
It was so insane.
It's so insane.
I call it a foreign belligerent, basically a foreign belligerent attack, a foreign belligerent occupation, because it's so foreign to our Constitution, and not even our Constitution, like our acts of Congress that are on the books. It's completely devoid of any sort of they couldn't even argue it was legal.
Yeah. And I want to get into that about the tie-in to how this is, because people are going to wonder, why are we still talking about COVID? Because it sets a precedence and we have to continue to speak about it so we don't forget, and why this matters for our future. Because man, if they were able to do what they did once, you don't think that they're going to come back and try and do it a second time?
Absolutely.
Even, you know, it was a testing ground. I want to ask you about the toll that you face. So obviously we're going to get into the court marshaling, but what was it like initially when you started to be that dissident, the voice of dissent from the inside? What happened?
It was like individuals wearing the same uniform with the same American patch turning on me in the matter of moments, just based on the logical principle stance I was taking. None of this was emotional. Like, this isn't an emotional thing. This is law and order. We've got law and orders on the books here. And it was my job to inform my chain of command. And so the toll it took was, it was so wild to see these service members who had, like my chain of command, who had the information and the laws that I was pushing forward, just literally put their fingers in their ears and go full tilt, like I was an absolute worst criminal on the face of the earth. And I know some of your audience can empathize with that, because, you know, not even from a military standpoint, some people were banned from the holiday dinner table because they, you know, didn't want to participate with something they never have to participate, period. Like, there is nothing that affords for somebody to give up their bodily autonomy and participate with, you know, I just don't care who you are. So that to me was one of the biggest tolls, was my brothers and sisters in uniform who swore the same oath then coming at me. And, you know,
what was the pressure? Like, was it just shut up and just do it? We're all doing it. Why are you causing a disruption? What was it? Like, what was the reason?
Oh, they didn't give any reason. There was no reason. Like, there was no communication. There was, like, I tried to have a dialogue, like human to human dialogue. And then I quickly realized, like, there's no, like, they're not even willing to have a dialogue. And that's when I had to do what I had to do, which is file Article 138 UCMJ and formalize this communication, because I knew that they were trying to play the shadow game and probably just, you know, just hope I would go away. But I'm like, no, like, as a public health officer at the Army Public Health Center, it's our duty to address these signals in the database. It's our duty to ensure service members have the option to accept or refuse these products, because it's the law. It's not me making this up. It's codified. And so it was a complete and utter willful ignorance to what I was saying. And so they would not communicate. What they would do is just completely shut me down with lawfare. And so they started lawfare. And the first things they did with lawfare was charge me with Article 92, which is a failure to obey a lawful order. And then the second thing they did was threaten me with Leavenworth imprisonment. Like, hey, you know, before you come into the courtroom, make sure your bags are packed to Leavenworth.
And this is because you're refusing the masks or the injection?
The masking, the testing, and the injection.
So they're like, you could be imprisoned now.
Right. That was one of the things they were threatening me with, was Leavenworth imprisonment because of the potential court-martial conviction. But I go to a court-martial, I sit there, I stare at the judge, I give him all my protected communication as I stare at him. And at the end of the court-martial, he says, hey, you know, you violated a lawful order. You're guilty of that. However, I'm going to give you no punishment, and I'm going to recommend to the commanding general he drops everything. And why would a judge do that? Well, he did that because he knew what I was saying was protected communication. I was bringing up substantial and specific dangers to public health and safety. I was bringing up the fact that you must give service members the option to accept or refuse. None of what I was doing was on my own accord, it was everything we were trained to do, and it's also codified and everything we're supposed to do. And so
I want to push into that. What you brought to the judge during the court martialing was you had specific concerns about what you were seeing. So what were those concerns? What did you tell the judge?
So in the military, we have a database called VAERS, which is the same as the civilian side of.
So there's like the civilian VAERS, and then there's the military VAERS.
Right. And which this was confirmed with the head immunologist in the Department of Defense. I confirmed with her, hey, what's the database we use in the military to record adverse events? She says VAERS. I'm like, okay, well, if it's VAERS, Army Public Health Center, you need to update your risk communication strategy, because right now it's just propaganda. And so when I was in the court martial and I was speaking to the judge, I was like, hey, judge, like the VAERS database is showing huge signals. And I provided that testimony. I provided that documentation. But
what signals were you seeing?
The death signals and then the injury signals. So at the time I was communicating it, I was just using the broad spectrum of signals, which was at that point in time, I think it was 17,000 deaths and like 800,000 injuries, right? And so regardless if that, and that's entirety. So that's not specifically talking about service members. That's entirety. And from my concern, I'm like, well, I mean, if we're showing signals on the civilian side, like we're going to show signals on the military side. And then on top of that, we had the Defense Medical Epidemiological Database that showed enormous myocarditis signals, pericarditis signals, cancer signals, issues with the Board of Outcomes for pregnant women, right? So we had those signals as well in that database, which was immense as well. And communicating that to Senator Ron Johnson's office and protected communication. So all of that was brought up in the court martial. And so, so we get to sentencing and he says, we're going to give him no punishment. And I'm going to do one further and recommend to the commanding general, like, hey, drop everything. But the commanding general use the conviction as means to continue forth with eliminating me from service after 17 and a half years. And so I fought for another year after the court martial. Active duty, fought for another year, all the way up to the Secretary of the Army and every general in between. And so I was messaging generals as a first lieutenant, and normally you would never see that because your chain of command would deal with the issue. But the problem was the chain of command was ignoring these issues, the protected communication, all the laws, X, Y, and Z. And so it was like, well, I mean, that's what we've been trained to do, exercise the chain of command. And so, I did all that. I congressionals, everything. And that's kind of what the deal was with the pardon was. It was like, no, like this individual went through every possible means of redress of this conviction prior to the president of the United States. And the fact that it got to the president of the United States is crazy. Is absolutely insane.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure you weren't expecting that. When you were discharged, you said, I served to defend liberty, not to submit to a pharmaceutical regime. What did you mean by pharmaceutical regime?
Yeah, so the pharmaceutical regime of mandating and pressuring service members into they must participate with these products. I mean, it got to a point. It's like, well, if I'm defending the Constitution, right, and I can't exercise and be a beneficiary of those guaranteed the rights that I'm securing, then what am I serving for? What's the purpose of taking an oath if I can't be a beneficiary of the oath I take, which is the securing the Constitution and the rights therein, versus having to bow down to a pharmaceutical, in the military. And we're still having this issue in the military where service members are still getting kicked out to this day because of mandatory flu injections on an annual basis. And the fact that they want to just exercise their accommodation to refuse it, right? Whether that's religious, medical, or your right of conscience. And they're being discharged because of that. But the question I ask is like, well, what happened to flu the entire pandemic, quote unquote pandemic, right?
It hid from COVID. It was a miracle.
And so the military is like, it's a cash cow for the pharmaceuticals. It's a cash cow for them. So
do you think that there is something nefarious, a reason why they required our first line of defense to take an injection that had zero safety testing and forced it so hard that if you didn't take it, if you weren't a yes man, you were out? Do you think there's something more nefarious than it just being, oh, we were just idiotic and we got a little crazy at that time? Men don't belong in women's sports. 79% of Americans agree, but only one athletic brand is taking a stand: XXXY Athletics. Their brand mission is to stand up for female athletes and the protection of women's sports. The clothes are so high quality. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts right now. This one's my favorite. You guys ask about it every time I wear it because it also makes a statement that you stand with women and girls. XXXY Athletics has amazing logo tees like what I'm wearing right now, and premium workout clothes including leggings, moisture-wicking tops and tanks, tennis dresses. You guys have seen me wear that cute tennis dress that's gonna be my go-to all summer, and skirts and more. You no longer have to sacrifice fit, quality, and style to wear your values. And honestly, why in the world would you give your money to the big brands that sell women out when you could wear XXXY Athletics? So head to thetruthfits.com, enter promo code RootedWings20 to get 20% off. That's code RootedWings20 for 20% off only at thetruthfits.com.
I do think it was more nefarious. I think it was literally an attack on our nation. And the first place you would want to attack if you're attacking a nation is the military, obviously, right? And I say that because I think we have to go back to the elections, really. If you're looking at the election system, which is national security infrastructure, whether you're Republican, Democrat, I don't care what you are, but that's national security infrastructure. And we have evidence that it was foreignly attacked, and that was an act of war. And then what did we have after that? January 2021, right? The installation of a foreign belligerent occupying power. And then what do we have after that? The weaponization of mandates on the force. It would be completely different if you said this was optional, which it should have been because that's the law, right? It would have been completely different if you went up to a service member, the chain of command comes down to a service member and says, hey, we've got these injections available for COVID-19. They're optional, take it or leave it, right? Anybody with the brain at that point in time would obviously leave it because they would understand risk analysis and be like, wait a second, I'm not even close to being at risk.
Yeah.
But I do think it was more nefarious. And I think the more time goes on, the more we'll find out exactly what was going on there with this whole push.
Well, let's move into January 2025. You received that unexpected pardon by President Donald J. Trump, who said in his executive order, the military unjustly discharged those who refused the vaccine, regardless of the years of service given to our nation, after failing to grant many of them an exemption that they should have received. Federal government redress of any wrongful dismissals is overdue. And then you posted, I just received a presidential pardon from President Donald J. Trump. I'm humbled, grateful, and ready to continue fighting for truth and injustice in this great nation. So take us to that moment and what that was like for you to get that pardon and how that validated your stance.
Yeah, so I believe it was a Wednesday, and I got a direct call from the White House. Elise Johnson in the White House, she's the pardon czar. I got a direct call simultaneously because they were on the same phone. Colonel Matthews, he's former colonel, now White House counsel, and they both called me and told me, hey, I just want to let you know, President gave you a full unconditional pardon for your conviction, the court martial. And I was just, it was amazing. it was emotional. It was amazing, and it was just such a battle, and um, it was incredible. I wanted to tell certain people, but those certain people were no longer in my life, and unfortunately, lost my twin brother in November 2024.
I'm so
Um,
sorry.
to an and so I wanted to reach out to him and call him, and it was sad to think about. But it was an amazing moment of just the fact that the president of the United States, not only for the injection, because he has been anti-mandate the entire time, but the masking and testing as well kind of solidified, like, oh, he's tracking the whole I call it the trifecta, which is the
Mm.
testing, the masking, and the injections. And so it was amazing.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about your loss too. Was your brother by your side throughout the whole process?
Um, Not necessarily. He wasn't seeing the things the way I was seeing things.
Mm.
But towards the end, he was realizing what was actually happening and what was going on. And for the first time, I was really, I mean, we were connecting on a much deeper level. He was seeing what was going on. He was understanding why I was doing what I was doing. And unfortunately, there was a whole backstory I won't get into, but yeah, in November, he lost his life, took his life. He was,
Mm.
I say, he was poisoned by the pharmaceutical company because the VA started giving him psychotropics for some of the issues he was dealing with. And anybody who understands those medications understands that there's a high risk of induction of suicidal ideations and suicides. And uh, this is kind of a shout out to the veteran community out there, and the situation in general. It's like, and we wonder why there's a suicide crisis when we hand out psychotropics like they're going out of style, like they're candy. And then these psychotropics directly attribute to these suicidal ideations and suicide. And so that was kind of the situation there. Still dealing with that. And yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I have a lot of siblings and that just hits close to home. I'm so sorry for your loss. Um,
Appreciate it.
let's talk about how all this serves as a sobering warning for Americans and why we shouldn't stop talking about this. Why your story is really, really important, and why we need to tell our kids about what happened during that crazy time period of 2020. What lessons is can people take home from this story about the risks of unchecked government power or institutional overreach?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is it goes back to the quote, it's a republic if you can keep it. It goes back to our individual responsibility to stand up and to do the right thing, and to prop to understand that we, the people, as the people, we're the higher authority versus the public servants. The public servants carry out the contract, which is the Constitution. But if for whatever reason they start to go outside that box, like the last 5 years, or maybe continuously, because we do see examples of individuals going outside that box in which we put them in, which is the Constitution, specifically public servants, then we have a duty to redress and to document that and properly instruct these public servants. And so that's one of the biggest things. And if you're not individually um, willing to stand for yourself, nobody's going to come save you. And I understand there's individuals who can't stand for themselves, and that's why somebody else, some of us need to shoulder some of that load. But if men and women of this republic, that's our duty, is to stand and to secure our form of government, which is written down in the Constitution. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the public servants' duty to ensure that they stay within that confines in which we put them in. So I think
Yes,
that's the biggest message. That's the biggest message.
that's good. I was kind of, as I was prepping for this, I was thinking about historical context. And I'm sure everyone can remember back from our elementary years when Patrick Henry rallied Americans against British tyranny. And, he has that famous quote that we all remember: give me liberty or give me death. And I want to ask you how your stance against what you saw as modern tyranny echoes this founding moment, and why resisting overreach matters so much in not only America's history, but in our future.
Give me liberty or give me death. Liberty entails morality. There's morality and liberty. There's freedom, and morality is liberty. And so anything devoid of morality is not liberty. So give me liberty or give me death, because if there's not liberty, then there's no morality. And so that's exactly what we've seen the last 5 years. There was no morality in their overreach. They there was no, they didn't have the moral high ground. There is no moral high ground. So the individual out there listening, if I could empower you, it's like, you have the moral high ground. If what you're doing is moral and just, you're securing your liberty, you have the moral high ground to any sort of overreach the institution or the government tries to execute. But we have to remember, it's not the institution. There's always a man or woman behind the institution. They love to hide and try to hide behind the institution. But the moment you go for the individual that's pressing and pushing that overreach on you, you're breaking the veil of the institution. And you'll find out real quick, they don't like that. They don't like when you call them out by name, the public servant who swore an oath or should have sworn an oath and has that on record, an appointment, official records. And so, it's not the institution, it's not the government, it's the men and women. We, the people, make up our form of government. And if a man or woman, public servant, is not acting in accordance with their sworn oath to the Constitution, well, then you have a duty to properly instruct them, stand up, morally instruct them, and secure your liberty.
What's next for you? Where are you back in the military, or what are you doing now that you are a fully pardoned man?
So right now, the Army has all my paperwork. They have my pardon warrant. They have my Board of Military Corrections. They have my request for reinstatement, whistleblower testimony, evidence of service members who violated the law that are still serving. And one of those is the House of Representatives. You have Ginny Vindman, knowingly broke the law. He's a House of Representatives, District 7, Virginia, who sits on the House Armed Services Committee. That was the staff judge advocate who sent me to a court-martial. So the Army has all this information. The ball is in the Army's court. I never stopped serving our republic. I never signed off on my DD 214 when I left the military. I have been in the civilian side, working private company. And so it's been nice. I've been homeschooling my children. But if I get the phone call to serve my country, I will, again, in a uniformed capacity, then I'm open to it. We'll just have to kind of see how that plays out.
If you don't end up going back into the Army, what do you see yourself doing? Because your story and who you are is so important to the fabric of America. I'm curious if you have other thoughts of where you could be used.
I definitely wouldn't mind, facilitating constitutional training and helping other people empower themselves to stand up for their liberties and properly instruct their form of government, whether it's at a local, a state, or a federal level. Right now I have a website, Freedom Fighter 1776. I just kind of put information out there, and but I don't know. Somebody asked me if I would run for politics, and I just don't think I'm not closed off to it completely, but at the same time, it's like, I don't think it matters who runs for politics, as long as if they're doing what they're supposed to, which is their oath of office. Does it really matter who goes into those positions? I mean, we would like some, charismatic people, I suppose, but as long as look at what happened the last 5 years. Like, 90% of them failed at what they did. So
Yeah,
if we could just get people in there that carried out their oath of office, that'd be great.
it's pretty simple. I'm all for limited government, and that's pretty much like, that's where the limitation is. Just do what you were designed to do. This has been such a great conversation. As we wrap up, just projecting forward. The world is really unstable right now, and I don't know what comes next. I do think that COVID was a testing ground. I said that from the beginning. I think this is a giant test to see how far they can push a free people. So if and when round 2 comes back, whatever it looks like, what would your encouragement be in standing for what is true and right this time?
I would say, most importantly, get down on your knees, give it over to God Almighty, ask for that discernment, ask for that guidance, ask for that knowledge, ask for that wisdom, and then stand up and carry out what you feel called to carry out in securing liberty and securing the just and the moral right. If it's in the form of another pandemic, I would say obviously don't participate with the weaponized diagnostics. I would say look for alternative information, and I would say not to, if you find yourself getting emotional, I would say logic versus emotion, logic wins, and to, kind of take a step back and control the controllables and go from there. But
How can people follow you and just see what you're up to and where you go from here?
yeah, I've got an X account at MC Bashaw, Bashaw on X. I've got a Facebook. I'm not too active over there. I've got a website, freedomfighter1776.com. You can read all the protected communication that I submitted to Congress, my chain of command. You can listen to court-martial testimony and things like that. But yeah, that's where people can find me.
I'll have all of that linked in the show notes too for our listeners. Thank you so much for your service and for being brave and for standing for truth and against all odds. And congratulations on your pardon.
Thank you so much. God bless you.